welcome to a new series of Motorsport Talks. Today we have Marc Olle with us. Marc is a performance engineer with experience in Formula One as well as other motorsports categories, also has worked as vehicle dynamics in the motorsports industry. Marc, today we're really happy to have you. We want to go over all the details of your career. We want to make sure that everybody who's listening gets to know you as much as possible. But before we go into the details, it would be great if you could start maybe explaining us what are your origins? Where do you come from? And who is Marc Olle?
So hello everyone, it's a pleasure for me to be able to share my experience with you. Thank you for the invitation. So I am Marc, I'm Igualada, it's a small town. I've been, my latest role has been as a performance engineer in Williams Formula One team. Recently we have created the performance engineering Formula One course so that we can actually share it with everyone.
Very good. So very happy to have you here again. So tell us a little bit about your studies. I noticed, or I saw on your LinkedIn profile, you're a mechanical engineer.
Yes.
And you did a 5-year degree, which was common in the Spanish curriculum some time ago. Tell us a little bit, what were you involved in during your studies? And I also see that you went to Chalmers University in Sweden. Tell us a little bit about your experience as a student and maybe extracurricular activities that you were involved in.
So I studied mechanical engineering, bachelor's degree in SAPE, it's the Polytechnical University of Catalonia. This was back in 2007. So I was involved there studying the general, what it's called here, industrial engineering. Mm-hmm. And my specialization was in mechanics. So I was specialized in mechanical engineering. However, in 2011, I went for a double diploma in Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden, and there I did the master's in automotive engineering. So in 2011 and 12, I moved from Barcelona to Gothenburg to carry out the last part of the degree in there. So that's been my first part of the studies. Then I spent, as we'll see, probably we'll talk later on, a few years in the industry, and I did my second master's in this case in motorsport engineering in Oxford Brookes back in 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. So that's been more or less my level of studies, the main degrees I've got.
Very good. And I noticed that you were involved in Formula Student. Was it in the university in Barcelona or in Sweden?
No, I didn't have the chance to join in Barcelona when I was studying there. However, as soon as I went to Chalmers, I had the chance to actually join the Chalmers Formula Student team. Mm-hmm. And it was a really unbelievable experience. I learned a lot, and I'm really proud of having joined and having spent so many hours back then in Chalmers Formula Student. In fact, we were really proud because the team was really small, and we actually became the overall winners in Silverstone. And the years where the electric cars were starting to get familiar in the Formula Student world, and we're really proud we actually achieved best results. Where we were competing the combustion engine cars with the electric engines, which wasn't fair at the time, but we managed to actually to win with a really low budget. So it's one of the things that I have always felt really proud of my student life.
Definitely a very incredible achievement. And just to put things into context, in what year was that?
This was between 2011 and 2012. So in 2011 is the year that I was actually doing the master's in automotive engineering in Chalmers. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, in the end of the summer until winter, we're designing the whole car. So in Chalmers, there is a policy that all the team needs to be renewed every year. So you don't have the chance to repeat. So every member can just go 1 year and just 1 year. And so basically the 25 people, the 25 members of the team, were new since the August 2011, and then just based on the previous data, the previous design from the previous years, we actually started to build and to design from scratch the car until winter. Then it was over winter and after winter where we froze the design, and then it's one of the things that we actually have, we feel really proud is that there we build and we manufacture the car all ourselves, except tires, the dampers, and specific components of the engine. The rest, every single part, every single item, the rims, the hubs, the uprates, the push rods, all the legs of the suspension, any single unit of the car, even the chassis, which was a aluminum steel steel frame. It was actually designed by ourselves. So we spent a huge amount of time on the lathe, on the milling machine, on the CNC, building ourselves from a block or from a bar of aluminum to a car, actually. So it was also a good experience. And then in the late part of 2012, facing into summer, we started the testing. So it was the first time for us to actually go from a car to actually analyze the data and to assess the performance of the car, doing data analysis, analyzing the dynamics of the car, and making sure that everything is working as expected. So before we were hitting the track at Silverstone, which was our first race of that year.
So this is actually really impressive, and maybe if you could walk us through a little bit your involvement, no? Your specific tasks in the Formula student team, because we have a lot of students in our academy that are today involved in Formula students. So it would be great to understand how similar these roles would be today to what you were doing in the past.
Yes, so during the design phase, I was responsible of designing all the Armstrong mass assembly. So I did do the design of the hubs, uprights, and all the bearing assembly, like the conceptual design, doing all the calculations to make sure that everything would withstand the loads, and we won't have any issues with the life, with the fatigue life, and so on. So both designing and the structural analysis of those components. And then apart from that, I was responsible of the drive line on the rear. The rear, because we were buying the limited slip differential, so this part was just assessing and doing a benchmark of the kinds of units that we had available, because we didn't actually design anything on the rear. So we're just buying the drive shafts, the differential, and we were just to assess how these items and which items we would have, and then to make sure that all the joints, the CV joints and the rear axle, our expectations and the need. The manufacturing process, I was part of the responsible of metal work machining on the manual machine. So I was responsible on the lathe and the milling machine especially. So it was impressive because with a few months, I counted more than 800 hours of lathe and mill. As you can imagine, this is actually no nights for a few months because we were also doing some other activities. So we had to do both manufacturing and then keeping on with the studies and with the internship that I was doing back then. So that was the other part. And then the final step was doing the testing. I was a vehicle dynamics engineer that we were calling. I was analyzing the tire data. I was analyzing the sensors to make sure that everything was working as expected. And that was the latest role I had as a engineer there in the team. So basically we had the three phases: from design, manufacturing, and then the final stage with track test.
So definitely, like as you said, a fairly small team. There was a lot to do, and it's obvious by the fact that you had to be involved in several different areas, and it must have been a great experience. No, you
Yes.
were able to not only apply some engineering theory, certain designs, but also you were actually manufacturing the parts themselves and then analyzing data from sensors. So yeah, definitely must have been a great experience for you. And now I noticed that you mentioned the thesis. It would be great if you could maybe talk about it a little bit.
Yes, since at the time I was there in Chambers doing the masters, I also had to do the master thesis. Got a position as an internship in Volvo Cars. So it was an internship between the manual transmission and the vehicle dynamics department.
Mm-hmm.
And during that internship, I used part of the activities to actually work on my master thesis. So the main topic of the master thesis I did was to study the torque split over the front-wheel drive car, basically on the differential. So initially it was a modeling of the differential of all the forces, and then we designed, I designed a rig to assess and to analyze changing different bushings inside of the case of the differential, where the planetaries go, how this change of friction was actually changing the torque split. And then when this was completed, we did the FEM analysis of the differential so that we understood how the deformations of the differential were, and we could actually improve the model. Then based on this information, we improved the model, and when we had all the knowledge, we implemented in Daimler. It's a vehicle dynamics modeling software, how this was affecting actually the behavior of the car in terms of the step-steer response that the car has and some of the distinction that some of the cars report. So this was the main topic, and I did that during the year that I was doing the masters there in Sweden.
Was this for a specific vehicle range or car model?
For one of the most common front-wheel drive differential that the Volvo cars use. So yeah, basically it wasn't for a specific car. It's the main one that they use, depending on there's a torque range, but most of the cars use that that front wheel drive differential.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So then that takes us to the end of your like first block or stint of studies. And I'm just following a little bit your LinkedIn profile again. I think the next step, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the next step is your first full-time job with an automotive company, which is called Ideada. Ideada is a company that's in the south of Barcelona. A lot of engineers go through that company. Even Xavier Balesta, instructor from one of our other courses, he also worked there for some time. So it's a very nice coincidence that you also worked there. Maybe tell us a little bit, how did you find that role, and what were you actually doing with that company?
Yeah, actually, as you have already mentioned, this was my first full-time position as an engineer with the master's degree, with the bachelor's degree. So although I had worked previously, this was my first, let's say, pure officially engineering role. So I was there for nearly 3 years, and I was working as a project performance engineer. Basically, Ideada is a consultancy, so all the projects that you actually do, you might be doing some internal, but most of the projects are done for different companies, different OEMs. So you work for a wide range of brands that manufacture cars, and you do projects for them. They outsource and they contract Ideada for doing several projects. So in here, it's a consultancy, so then you are responsible of doing the analysis, the engineering behind the dynamics, but also for doing the follow-up with the customer. So to do the meetings, actually to make the quotation, to then present the results. So there is a wide range of things that you need to do that you usually don't do in other companies when you actually work. So basically, this makes you actually as well improving your skills as a manager, making able that you can actually do and abstract the key points and technical reports, report the things correctly to the customer, have a good timing, everything under control. So all the management, if you are working with different colleagues within the company, make sure that you are managing all the project really well. So it was a really good experience, not only as an engineer, but also as a manager. As far as the engineering is concerned, I was actually responsible and working on the mainly track testing. So we're analyzing the data, setting up the sensors on the car, instrumenting the cars, and making several analyses. So I was also working on the vehicle dynamics part of the car, so mainly the longitudinal part. On the longitudinal projects I was also doing was about the running resistance characterization. So making sure that we were understanding and doing the breakdown of the different forces that are the cause of the running resistance. So we're doing the breakdown of the aero forces, the aero drag forces, doing tests on the wind tunnel, then assessing the drive train losses on the chassis dynamometer, the rolling resistance of the tires with tests on the drum dynamometers, which is a dynamometer used for the tires. Basically, we're doing the breakdown and we're analyzing which part of each of these things was contributing to the overall running resistance. And then we're doing projects for different customers to assessing and comparing and actually benchmarking to the competitors. So this was one of the final projects that I had also done in Ideada. So as an engineer, Ideada gave me a lot of things. It's an impressive company. I strongly recommend that company to everyone. Not only for a graduate as engineer, but also as a more senior engineer. It allows you the chance to actually develop your skills as an engineer. And this is what I did there. I spent 3 years and I grew up as an engineer in Ideada.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So 3 years. And I mean, you're talking very positively about the company and your experience with the company, but how important do you think that first experience in your career, how important do you think it was for the following steps, or the following jobs that you've been having afterwards?
Actually, I would say that Ideada was key for the following steps. Then I learned lots of things that I had never learned anywhere. Although I did already an internship in a company like Volvo, or I was involved in former student, or I studied 2 degrees at that time, I didn't have such a knowledge of how to, for example, do data analysis more in deep, to analyze different tests, to actually set the sensors on the car, how to make calibration, different things that I had never done before, how to actually develop different ideas and concepts on there, do part of the design that I was also doing, making sure that I was understanding well each of the parameters, like what we get from each of the different departments. So for me as an engineer, it gave me an additional boost and additional knowledge that I had never had anywhere else. So just for that, I believe that IDIADA was key for the success in the future steps.
Talking about the next step then after IDIADA, so after 3 years you left IDIADA, you joined McLaren Automotive as a vehicle development engineer.
Yes.
Maybe, if you could walk us through how did you find the role? So did you apply to a job? Was there a recruiter that maybe approached you? And then also, what did it like to work for McLaren Automotive?
Yeah, actually, moving from IDIADA to McLaren was really exciting at the time. McLaren is a pinnacle of motorsport and automotive engineering. I was really happy that I could join McLaren. Actually, I had an offer for McLaren for going to McLaren MTC, which is the McLaren Technology Center back in Woking. But I knew that McLaren had a small team as well of engineers, which are based actually inside IDIADA facilities. So it was, I actually changed company, but I managed to join McLaren, but in the IDIADA team they had. So although I was changing company, I was still going through the same gate. But instead of as an employee, I was going as a customer after one day. So I was finishing in IDIADA on a Friday, and the following Monday, I was entering to the same gate, but with the McLaren gear, let's say, and being a customer of IDIADA. So McLaren, in McLaren, I was a vehicle development engineer. So I had the chance to work on different aspects of the car. As the role says, you can do several things. It doesn't say anything specific. So in my time, in my experience, I worked mostly on aerodynamic stability of the cars. I was working on the 570, which was being made at the time. It's one of the smallest McLaren cars that McLaren has ever done. So the fact of being the smallest, it was quite challenging because it doesn't have the same loads as the bigger ones. Also, the car is lighter, so we don't have such amount of data to compare. So it was quite tricky to make sure that we had a car that was being able to go fast on track, but also being stable, braking well, and so on. So I remember that those days, people there were struggling quite a bit before launching that car. So we focused a lot on the stability of that car. So I was working on the aerodynamic stability, proposing different items of the car, of a small rear gurneys, rear wing, installing as well the aerodynamics under the floor. And then not only aerodynamics, but also the braking performance. So I was as well responsible for several braking performance tests, as well as assessing the stability at higher speed. These were the main two topics I worked there, but I was also involved in several others, like several static and dynamic tests that each of the cars have to do before they get under production. So yeah, that was my main responsibilities at the time I worked there. Mm-hmm. I have to say that my experience in McLaren, as you might have seen in my CV, was shorter than expected, because although I was really happy there, at that time I decided to actually take kind of a gap year after a few years in the industry and go to study my second master's in motorsport in this case. So I left McLaren to then study my second master's.
You're already working for an incredible company, one of the best companies in the automotive sector that is out there in the world, gaining really good experience. What drives you to make this change? What was the motivation behind the decision?
Yeah, actually, the master's in motorsport had always been a thing that I wanted to do. And I had the feeling I was getting used to the industry, and I was feeling really comfortable. So I decided that either I was doing that at that time, or I would have never done it. Because initially I wanted to do it after I finished my first period of education, so my first bachelor and master's in Chalmers. But then at that time, I had always put things on the balance, and then I decided to come back home. I found the opportunity in IDIADA, as we mentioned, and then I decided to come back home. Actually, I couldn't go to Oxford. I decided to work in IDIADA, and then the years were actually going on, and I decided either I go now to do that master, and probably I will then regret, because it will be something that I will never have the chance to do it again. And that's basically the main motivation and the main reason why actually I moved that. Actually, it was tricky because I was in McLaren, so I managed to go, as you mentioned, to one of the pinnacles of motorsport, McLaren, one of the biggest and the most important companies, or the most well-known companies in that field. And it was really tough for the leave McLaren. But I have to say that actually my manager there, I was scared at the time, but my manager actually offered me the chance. He was really happy of the few amount of time I was there. So he offered me the chance to come back there as soon as I wanted. So it was really actually exciting and motivating from my side, because I was scared initially leaving McLaren would actually be doors being closed. One of the things that I learned is that if you do the things well and if you work hard, you can end up like things like this, that you work in a company for a few months and then the manager is telling you in front of everyone that the doors are open to come back once you want. So then I went to Oxford to study my master's and leaving McLaren was really happy. So I was feeling really proud of myself of leaving a place and going to study, knowing that after the master's, I had the chance to actually come back to the place where I was enjoying my life as an engineer.
That must have been a very nice feeling to have, and it's definitely one of the best pieces of advice that I guess you could give to someone that is now facing a similar situation to what you were facing some time ago, right? I also studied at Brooks, right? And I remember when I studied at Brooks, most of us didn't have that much professional experience, maybe 1 or 2 years professional experience. Some people with experience in automotive, a few lucky ones already with experience in motor racing. But there were also people with other backgrounds, right? Different kind of experience, and they wanted to get into motorsports. I think for your case, you already had very, very strong experience as a professional working at Ideala, working for McLaren Automotive. Knowing where you were coming from and where you were going, what was your experience at Brooks? Was it something that you felt was valuable? Did it help you? We're going to go into the following steps now, but I would like to know your opinion of Oxford Brooks and the courses that you did, and how was the experience in general?
Yes, Oxford Brooks, as everyone is aware nowadays, is one of the universities with the highest reputations and the highest links with Formula One teams in Europe, at least, and probably in the world. So it's one that has the highest level in terms of being able to achieve a job in Formula One, and especially of the engineering and the level that they teach, which is, they say it's really a specialist and really high. So I had the high expectations and I wanted to go to what they say is one of the best universities in Europe. I had already studied in 2 different universities, so I wanted to go to a third one in UK to make sure that what they say is true. So my expectations were really high. I also had experience, so I knew already what are the important things that you actually have to look at when you work as an engineer. So my mind had the 2 ways. From one side, my background as an engineer for studying the bachelor's and the master's. On the other side, I had my mind and my background as having worked as an engineer in three companies before I joined Oxford Brooks. So I had a high level of expectations. I was going there to actually make sure that I was learning the most I could. I made an effort of leaving a company where I was working until really good. So actually I was taking the master seriously, because otherwise I wouldn't have never left the job in McLaren. So I have to say that after that year, indeed I learned a lot. Brooks is a really good university. I recommend everyone to do the masters. But on the other hand, I felt that there were things that probably were too basic, or I felt I needed a little bit more, especially in terms of vehicle dynamics, lap time simulation, and aerodynamics, which are probably one of the 3 main reasons why I was going there. Mm-hmm. So I felt as a graduate, probably it might be good, but probably not even enough, because it might be things that are being explained there that you might have already done on your bachelor's, or if you have studied in another university. So from my side, all the topics were advanced vehicle dynamics, advanced aerodynamics. For me, I feel I probably was too eager. I wanted more than what they're offering, because some of the things that were doing, I already knew that. This wasn't the end of the world, because then I just used Oxford Brooks and what they had to actually learn the maximum I could and actually develop my skills. So for example, I was really interested in the vehicle dynamics. So in Brooks, they have a 4-post rig. I was really interested on the ride and the suspension. So I probably will talk later on about that, but taking profit that I was working on another team back then, I used Oxford facilities, the rig, to actually make sure that I was understanding well and being able to correlate tests on the rig with vehicle models in Adams that I was doing at that time, and several things like that, that if I hadn't gone to Brooks, I would have never probably done it before. So Brooks has lots of positive things. And as a motorsport engineering masters, they say it's the best. but for sure it has a high reputation and probably you can learn lots of things.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, I was interested in your opinion, no, because I think overall the opinion is broadly positive, and I think I genuinely believe that Brooks is a very good university, and the master's degree that they offer is one of the best out there. And as you say, I would also recommend anybody who's interested in entering the world of motorsports to look at that master's degree and consider it seriously. But I was asking you this question specifically because, of course, you were coming already with a very strong background of working for a company that are making high performance cars. So yeah, of course, you already had a very high degree of knowledge of certain areas, no? And I think it's only natural that maybe in some areas you were maybe left wanting to know more about certain specific areas, no? But I think, well, you said something very important when you were talking about the 4-post shaker rig. From what I get is that you were kind of working very hard to create your own way, to create your own path towards achieving what you wanted to achieve, and Brooks was really key to achieve this, no? And you were putting your own efforts. And again, looking at your profile on LinkedIn, I saw that you were working or you did the thesis with a GT4 racing team. And I think that's really interesting because from what I get from here is that you were not only doing the thesis with them, you were also working for them as a race engineer in the weekend.
So that was one of the things. Taking profit, I moved to UK. I wanted to get the most of it. I wasn't sure of how much time I would be there. And for me, it was an effort of leaving my own country to going to another place. Also leaving a good job I had where I felt really rewarded as an engineer, to actually go to a study, to live as a student again, and to go to UK alone, leaving everything to go there to get the most of it. And then taking profit that in UK, the motorsport industry is so large, I just wanted to have a chance to join a team there. Then I found this opportunity in a GT4 team, GPRM. They were racing in the GT British Championship, Toyota GT86. And then, yeah, they actually made me an interview, and they were happy to bring me on board. They were looking for a race engineer, but they were also interested in the fact that I was offering my services to optimize the car performance. The team was relatively small. There were one of the bosses, one of the other race engineers, which was one of the bosses, and the other boss, which was a team principal. There was a guy, engineer, who was responsible for the engine. So there wasn't anyone else in terms of engineering. There was from the data acquisition system, from the data logging, there was a customer support engineer from the company that we were contracting, and then the mechanics and the tracker. So in the end, the team was really small, and basically I had the freedom to do what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So doing the test and doing the races, of course, the job was more or less accurate enough. So you have to make sure that the car is running well, that you are analyzing the data, and you are getting the metrics, and you are improving and the performance, and you are optimizing the setup. The same during the races, but then during daily basis, let's say, I had the chance to actually do several things on that car. So one of the things I had done, I disassembled all the front and the rear suspension of the car, and I was measuring like all the key kinematic points of the front and rear suspension. This was done so that I could also model the whole front and rear suspension, basically the whole car. And because there was no data of that car, there was no data from CAD design, you had to measure it all yourself on the car itself. So I was going to the workshops to making these kinds of measurements. Then for the rates of the anti-roll bars, the dampers, the springs, I had to go to the dynos to test, to identify which stiffness we were having, which options we had, so that I could implement and make all these models. So in the end, I did the whole vehicle dynamics model of the suspension of that of the car. Part of this information to actually do my thesis, which was about the suspension optimization, vehicle dynamics analysis with final uptime simulation of that car. So I used all these concepts together with then the 4-post rig, where I did the suspension optimization. So I brought the car on the 4-post rig in Brooks, and then I validated my model in terms of the ride and the vertical dynamics. And then as soon as I did that, this was part of the project. This we believe that we achieved more than half a second of performance.
Wow.
Of the compound Silverstone, because basically there hadn't been any actually investigation in the past about that, and the setup of the suspension of the car was nowhere. So at least we could actually optimize how much the performance of the car would be, and how much we could improve actually in Silverstone, which was the track that we were going the most often in that time. And then finally, we did the vehicle dynamics analysis, where I developed a driver model, and I could actually do several maneuvers as well to improve all the response of the car with the step steer, sinusoidal, and so on. And finally, a model where, taking profit, we had data across Silverstone. We validated the model with a lap time simulation to make the correlation and then be able to assess and predict, basically having a model using chassis sim as a lap time simulation software to actually validate and propose changes of the setup for the future tracks. So basically, this was kind of my experience working with a team. But you have to bear in mind that at the same time I was studying masters in Oxford, and the masters in Oxford is a master that if you want to learn a lot, you also have to work a lot. So as you imagine, combining both things, it was a little bit tricky. I strongly recommend to everyone to do this kind of activities, but at the same time, the job I had at that team, they gave me the job because I was also having a little bit of experience. But if I hadn't had any experience, so if I had gone as a graduate, probably I would have done the same steps. The only things that I would have achieved probably just a data engineer position or something a more junior level, but I would still recommend to everyone to actually use that experience to do these kind of things. Yeah. In the end, Formula One or any other motorsport or even automotive, they really appreciate that you have actually done the most of it and you have actually had as many experience related to the field that you want to work as better. So
definitely exciting project, and I know that this master's degree is a full-time program. You're left with very little time, and it's a very exciting project that you were doing, but also it feels like you were extremely busy, no? And I wonder how many other people were doing something similar like this.
Actually, I just know from that year, it was mainly myself. I believe I wasn't sure what he was doing, but he was actually mainly going to the races without doing any projects related to the performance of the car itself. And then I knew people who were doing the other way around, who were probably using Teams to just do the project.
I see.
But the fact of combining the two things and working there and having the tests and races, and then as well doing different projects, as far as I know, it was only myself at the tier.
So it's definitely that's definitely the representation of going the extra mile. So maybe after your time at Brooks, you joined a very exciting project in Formula E. I think that was end of 2016, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it was in September 2016.
And Formula E was only like 2 or 3 years old. So it was a very, very young series.
I joined in the end of season 2. So at the time I joined, we were just finishing season 2, and at the same time in parallel, they were doing the testing of season 3 car.
Very good. And so what team did you join, and what was your role?
I joined in Mahindra Racing Formula E team, and my role was a vehicle dynamics and simulation engineer.
And maybe a little bit about the tasks that you. So maybe first of all, because this might help people, right? So how do you find a job in a Formula E team?
Well, actually, at that time, it might look silly from some people, but I was in Oxford. So Oxford Brooks, as I said before, I strongly recommend to everyone. One of the reasons is because of the strong linkage in Formula One. So at that time, I had offers already to Formula One teams. I had even done interviews. But in this life, there are things which sometimes are more important than getting a job. So I decided to come back home. It was a personal decision I had taken. And actually, I knew that in Catalonia there was a Formula E team in close to Barcelona, actually close to a Formula One track in Barcelona. And then I just messaged that team to see if they were interested in having myself on board. And they answered me saying that yes, I went there to do an interview. And then they were happy to offer me the job. And then I knew that I was coming back home already with the job as well. I'm Formula E. So for me, I felt happy enough, so I didn't feel actually guilty of not having joined Formula One. I actually felt proud of myself and really happy of being able to finish my master's, coming back to Catalonia and having a job in Formula E. So this was more or less the main path and the main decisions I took. Obviously, Formula One, the jobs are usually advertised on the websites. In here, there was nothing. So I knew that the team was there. It just in the end, it's about networking, about sending a message on the right time to the right person. And in that time, they were looking for exactly that profile. So I just did the interview, and they just hired me.
That's
So
really
I was.
really interesting, no? Like you're just finishing. Of course, you come from a strong background already, working in automotive and very good companies in automotive. You finished master's degree at Brooks. You had to do interviews with the Formula One teams. You even received offers from Formula One teams to join them. And then you decide to email a Formula E team, like a very young team in a very young categories series, and yeah, only by that you start the conversation and you find a job
Yes.
that way. So
It was a bit of luck as well, but it just sending the right mail to the right time to the right person. So yeah, I was lucky, but I knew that that team was there, and I just did the. Actually, I wanted to try. I have to say that, as I mentioned before, one of the other alternatives was joining McLaren again, but I didn't want to join the same team yet because initially I wanted to see a little bit if I had the opportunity to join another motorsport category so that I get experience on a wide range of places. And that is where I found this Formula E position, and then I just joined it. I spent there 1 year and a half as a vehicle dynamics and simulation engineer. So basically, my tasks were I was the main responsible of the pre-event, of doing the simulation pre-event of the car, in the different aerodynamic levels of the car, and doing the main brake scans and all the typical pre-event that is usually done in motorsport for assessing and helping the race and performance engineers to optimize the setup of the car. Then I was also doing correlations between the driver in the loop simulator that we have and our lap time simulation model and the car data, so kind of a three ways. And then apart from that, we're doing several vehicle dynamics and simulation analysis for specific tasks and concepts that we were trying to investigate. So these were the main tasks I had. Apart from doing the track testing, I was attending to all the tests to support as a vehicle dynamics engineer to do simulations at the track if needed and to do any support from that. So this was my main responsibilities.
So when I don't have a background in vehicle dynamics, right? So I've worked mostly in aerodynamics. I'm curious to know, and I'm sure people will also be curious to know. That's why I'm asking the question. What tools are used? No, in Formula E, I appreciate the fact that maybe it was the early days, so there were a lot of things that still needed to be developed. But what kind of tools are used in simulation and modeling in Formula E? Maybe even nowadays they might be used.
Yes, usually one of the first things will be your data acquisition, your data analysis tool. In this case, it was Atlas. So the ECUs are provided by MIT, McLaren Applied Technologies, and everything that comes from there, you need to use Atlas, which is the package that they actually propose. They offer actually for doing the data analysis. Obviously, there are teams who have their own in-house software for analyzing that data. But we're using for data analysis Atlas. Lap time simulation, you need to have a lap time simulation software. Well, nowadays, so you have AVL, you have Canopy, you have Chassis, you have a wide range of softwares that you can actually use. You can use a vehicle modeling software in case you do. Some teams, they are more happy to go with the multimodal softwares like Adams or something like Daimler. Some teams go more with MATLAB Simulink modelings. In that case, we're just doing my tools. The tools I was using the most often were obviously the data analysis Atlas, and then I was using a lap time simulation software. The other one was MATLAB and Simulink, where we had the main small models of the car. As you already said, it was the beginning of the Formula E. It was the end of season 2, preparing for season 3. So the team was growing up really quick, actually. By the time I joined, the things were there was little information, and the knowledge of the team was really small. So we're focusing on the key points, the key parts of the car that makes improving the performance the most. So every time the team was growing, and more efforts and more resources were actually being put on the team. So I actually could see how the evolution of that team was in 1 year and a half. I felt it was nearly 5 years because we started from a really small team, and in the end, we nearly double, at least more than double the amount of engineers that was on the team. It was a good experience as well to see how much we were actually, as well as learning the knowledge of the team actually change and improved exponentially.
Definitely a steep learning curve for sure. How long did you stay with the team?
I spent on the team for 1 year and a half.
A year and a half. And then the big opportunity came. I say big because it was in Formula One.
Yes, well, basically, obviously, Formula One had always been my dream. I studied in Brooks, I studied in several places, but at the time I had the offers, I felt I didn't want to take those offers, and I was things on the balance, and I was preferring to actually staying back home, trying to find an opportunities back home. Obviously, finding a job in UK, luckily it's quite easy for the fact that UK has a lot of industry. However, here in Catalonia, I found it more challenging, but it was this kind of challenging was kind of as well, I was feeling really exciting of trying to find a job where I was feeling rewarded as an engineer at the same time of living in my hometown, let's say. Mm-hmm. So actually, I had never applied to a Formula One job position at the time I was in Mahindra. And it was actually in the beginning of 2018, in January, where I suddenly received a call from the chief performance engineer of Williams. And they wanted me to offer a job as a performance engineer, and they wanted to see me and to have an interview.
So they already knew you?
No, I had never met him, but those guys had contacts, either Oxford Brooks or from McLaren, because they had worked. And probably because of the good reference they had about myself. I don't know why they actually called me, offering me this position. Then it was really quick, because in less than 1 week meeting them, the chief performance engineer and the head of vehicle performance, both. The following week, I had already been given the offer actually to decide what I had to do. Then deciding it with my family and my partner, who were actually assessing what I had to do. It had been my dream, but I didn't want to move to UK. Then after discussing the fact that they were actually offering me that job, and I had never applied, I had the chance to go to Formula One with the big doors. I decided to take the opportunity and to join Formula One. So it was in the end of that month, I moved to UK again, and I've been there until now. Actually, this has been my latest role as a performance engineer in Williams Racing.
So not a bad way to enter Formula One, definitely. And coming from Formula E, how different was Formula One? What were the main aspects of the new role that you noticed that were different?
One of the main challenges are was the fact of joining such a big team. I was from a team where there were just two vehicle dynamics and simulation engineers, with a team that the vehicle performance team had more than 20 engineers. So from a team that there were just 4 or 5 people going trackside to a team that there are, I believe, around 20 people going trackside. From a team that there was no operations support during the events, from a team that had more than 20 or 30 engineers doing operations. So basically from a low budget in Formula E to one of the historic teams in Formula One. So the change was quite drastic. However, I have to say that the type of work and the type of kind of the theory, the science behind it, in the end is the same. So having experience in Formula E it's actually enough to join Formula One and understand how the system and how to make sure that you are familiar with the main dynamics and the science of the car. So from this point of view, the change was not really big. However, I have to say each car is different, each concept is different. So it requires time to understand as well the whole design, the whole package. Obviously, it's like with this, it might be day and night, the suspension layout of a Formula E car and the one of a Formula One car. The aerodynamic loads, the package, the map, everything is totally obviously different. Although the science that you apply in the end, the lap time simulation tools and everything, like the metrics that you do might be the same, the concept, the final product is not the same. So with this, it changes quite a lot. Then especially the role it changed a bit. So I was employed as a performance engineer. So I was no longer vehicle dynamics engineer. However, roles are quite similar. They overlap quite a bit. And in performance engineering, you are quite close with the vehicle dynamics team. So I was also still doing vehicle dynamic analysis, lap time simulation, performance analysis, data analysis, and so on. So the only difference is that then you support more the trackside events. So in Formula One, I was attending to all official trackside testing, and then I was doing all the operation support back from the operations from the factory. As well, one of the other things that changed the most is the driver in the loop. We had the small driver in the loop simulator enough to do the things that we wanted to do in Formula E. And then in Formula One, we had a really big and really awesome driver in the loop simulator, where you had the drivers coming really often on nearly, not daily basis, but at least once a week coming to the simulator to do tasks to help the vehicle dynamics team, the aerodynamics team to make correlation, to improve, to test different components in the simulator ahead of the races.
What's the main goal of a simulator? No, because I think simulators are quite a big thing in Formula One, but it would be good for everybody who's listening to understand what's the actual use of a simulator. You mentioned correlation. Is that the main thing, or is there more?
Yeah, you can think about the driver in the loop simulator as a lap time simulation model, but you unlock the driver model from the physical model of the lap time simulation, and you put the real driver on a platform. So obviously the models can be different. Different teams have different layouts of how the lap time simulation model changes compared to the driver in the loop. But in the end, the driver in the loop, the simulator, what they call it, the simulator or the deal, is actually a place where you are able to test different things before you go to the event. Basically, the amount of time you are allowed to test in Formula One is limited. It's really little. You have winter testing, you have the in-season testing, which is being reduced, and then you have all the free practice of all the races of the season. This means that the amount of time that you can actually evaluate things and test things on the track before the season starts is really limited. Then you use the simulator to actually be able to test any of the things that you would like to test and assess in the track. So on the simulator, you can change things as you do on reality. You can change anti-roll bar of the car, you can change the flap angle, you can try to adjust the balance, you can change the aero package, you put another rear wing on the car, you put it on the simulator, a new one. So you have all these modeled by the different teams, and this comes from the whole simulator model. Basically, it allows you to actually make sure you do tests and have a good package. Obviously, for having a good package, you need correlation. You need to make sure that this is similar to what actually the data does. So the data says. So we make a lot of work on correlation between the actual car and the simulator. Then the simulator is not only used for assessing and for being able to test, it's also used for actually operations, for improving the operations from a driver perspective. Let's say if the steering wheel has changed, or if there have been new procedures of how we actually go on the...
So maybe tell us a little bit about the use of a simulator in a Formula One team. I think by now most people understand that simulators are really important, but I think there is little known about what they are used for, what's actually useful for. If you can maybe walk us through the main important areas that it helps Formula One teams with.
Yeah, first of all, let me introduce what simulator is for the people who are not really familiar with the simulators. Simulator, or what it's called DIL. DIL stands for Driver in the Loop Simulator. It's actually a vehicle model that you have, which might be the same as the actual vehicle model where you do lap time simulation, but then instead of having your physical driver model or your driver model on the simulation environment, you release that feedback block and you put the real driver on a platform. And that's what the simulator is. Therefore, this allows us to actually test with the real driver anything we want on the car. Nowadays, the Formula One track testing is limited. So we just have the winter testing and really small in-season testing. Therefore, if you want to plan or to develop any item, you have no time to do anything during the year. Then the simulator plays a key role. So a simulator is used actually to do any test. We can change anti-roll, the suspension, the geometry. We can swap a rear wing. We can swap the aero package. We can change different things. And then we assess the performance on the track. We get as well the same as on the real car. We get telemetry alive. We get all the channels, the same ECU, all the same is actually set up on the simulator as well. Then we have a model that the key thing as well is to make sure that this model is correlated with the actual data. That's why we have, or I have been talking about correlation. People talk a lot about correlation. You need to make sure that your simulator is actually quite accurate compared to your actual car. And the models are behaving quite similar so that your metrics and your outputs and your conclusions are robust. And you are having something that it's reliable. So a lot of effort, a lot of time on the deal is done for correlation. So after each event, we try to correlate the models, we try to correlate different things, new geometries, new aero maps that we have developed. All these kind of things are correlated after the event. So simulator in the end is used as a test lab. as if it was winter testing or in-season testing, but on a controlled environment. Apart from that, the simulator is on the one hand used for testing, for assessing different tests and for developing the car on different areas, trying different things. But then it's also used for operational practice. So you have the chance to put the driver and to make sure that he can actually follow all the operations procedures for the install labs, in labs, out labs, the different switches on the steering wheel. If we have had a new release on the steering wheel, the driver will have the chance to start practicing initially on the deal rather than doing that on a Friday free practice. So we use the simulator as well as a kind of lab or practice for making sure that everything works from an operational point of view. It's not only the procedures, but also as well the maps that they see. If we have changed a new controls import of any of the electronic maps, that making sure that everything is working well on the control system environment. So usually on the simulator, you might have the simulator engineer, which is usually there controlling that the simulator is working well, responsible for correlation. But then you can have the race engineer, performance engineer, vehicle dynamics, aerodynamicists, and then the controls engineers. So it includes a wide range of fields as well, and everyone is putting a lot of effort to make sure that what we get from the simulator is really useful and a key point for developing the car.
Very good. Really exciting to hear about all the details of simulators in Formula One. So that was the time for Williams. Now I want to talk about your course, right? So you decided to join our Motorsports Academy, and you have prepared a course. You're launching a course in our platform. Maybe tell us a little bit about the course, what's the title of the course, and what's in the course, and who's it for? Tell us a little bit about it.
The course is about performance engineering in Formula One. So this course is firstly about for students who would like to make a step on their career and start getting a job or in Formula One or in motorsport in general. I recommend that the students are at least on the second year of the degree, for example, or graduated. It's not only for students, but also for professionals who want to move or make a step from automotive to motorsport or from another motorsport category to Formula One. So in this course, we'll talk about the main aspects as a performance engineer and the main tools and the theory behind the main concepts that we work, and specifically to Formula One. Obviously, as I have mentioned before, the science, all the theory behind motorsport, behind the car, it's the same if you work in Formula E, in LMP1, in Formula One, but some key points change a bit. So we try to be initially general with the motorsport, but then specific to Formula One environment. So the course is about initially the performance engineering roles. We'll talk about the vehicle model, the sensors, the data reconstruction, which is how we actually get those data outputs and how these outputs are actually assessed from a performance engineering point of view. And then we'll talk about all the pre-event jobs. So how we actually assess the simulation pre-event, both the simulation and the suspension pre-event, to actually make sure that we have a setup really well prepared and optimized ahead of the event. So we'll talk about each of the components of the setup. How is camber affecting the performance of the car, how we adjust camber, the toes, the ride heights, the suspension, all the front fares, the gaps, the bumper stops, the anti-roll bars, the rear third springs. And then we'll talk as well about the aerodynamics package, which are the main packages that we can play, what we adjust, what we don't adjust, which is the effect of each of these components. And then we'll talk about the procedures from pre-event to in-event, what we do as a performance engineer during an event, which analysis, what we do. We'll put different case studies of analyzing different kind of data, trying to make sure that we understand well the main metrics that we need to actually use to compare different setups or to optimize the performance of the car, assess the limitation of the car. We'll talk about the post-analysis, post-event analysis, which is after the event. We have a huge amount of data. We have several runs. We have tested several things. What we do after the event, we make sure that we test, we analyze the different tests that we have done, but also if there has been any limitation, we try to investigate what the root cause has been. And then we put different efforts and we try to analyze that. In here, then we will talk about all this workflow, and then we will propose and we'll explain the theory and the different keys, the balance, the limitations, how we actually analyze these, how we analyze the aerodynamics, the importance, the right of the suspension, and so on. So basically, we'll put and we'll talk about that, and finally, we'll have a final assignment that we'll have the chance to to put in practice everything that we have learned in the course.
Definitely, I think an amazing course. I've seen the course already. I really wish that I had a course like this when I was studying at university. I don't know whether you have the same feeling, but I just feel like there's so much detail in this course, and so much knowledge shared by you, not only experience that you've gained in automotive and some motorsports categories, but also in Formula One. And I'm really looking forward to seeing students going through the course.
Actually, I totally agree with you, because although there are a lot of offers in motorsport engineering itself, like the Oxford Brookes Masters or the Cranfield Masters or several others, different master's degrees. For example, I have never had part of any course where you have a specific and such a knowledge from a people or from a person who has been on the industry, talking specifically about Formula One and the performance of the dynamics or this kind of different course that the Motorsport Engineering Networks now is actually doing. So it would have been, I wish I had had such a course when I was studying, because it would have actually opened my mind as well to put more in practice of what we actually use in Formula One or in motorsport in general, in the different departments, so from vehicle science to aerodynamics and different fields in the motorsport world. So having such a knowledge share is really, actually, there is a lack of knowledge share nowadays in this field. So finding courses like that is an opportunity that I strongly recommend to everyone.
Really exciting. Thank you very much, Mark, for doing the course and publishing it with us. We are running out of time now, but I wouldn't want to finish this conversation that we're having without asking you two last questions. So the first one is maybe looking back at your career and knowing everything that you know now and reflecting on everything that you've done. What do you think is the one factor or the two or three factors that have been really fundamental and key to the success of the career that you've had?
I would say it's the accumulation of all the activities I have done, but mainly the fact that I have been able to do the master's degree, the fact that I have been able to join Formula Student. So this is key, and this is really well considered by the Formula One teams and also by the automotive industry and several other motorsport industries. And then finally, the fact that actually I have been involved as well in the Masters in Motorsport in Oxford Brookes. So this is giving the final label and the extra boost that you need. So this is a typical question that the people ask, is how you actually get to Formula One. And we usually say there is no optimum path. There is all the paths can actually bring you towards Formula One. But if you make sure that you do the most as you can, so as much as you do, as more chances you have to actually join Formula One. So it's not only about Formula Student, but if you also, apart from Formula Student, you can do a project related to motorsport or a project related to any of the fields you're interested, you will have even more chances. And on top of that, if you do masters that it's actually critical or really has a higher reputation on the motorsport environment, this will be even the extra boost that will make the difference between you and another person who has the same knowledge or the same background as you. So for me, I would say it's the accumulation of all these activities I have.
And maybe I think you touched a little bit about recommendation, how a student can make it to Formula One, no? But maybe if you could talk about specifics, what would you recommend if you were talking to a student from university or maybe a young professional? What could you recommend to this person that he or she does to get into Formula One or maybe another top level category in motorsports?
The thing I would suggest is actually try to do as much as you can on your degree. For example, if you are studying or if you are working, try to do and to be brilliant of what you do. Then always try to actually push and never give up. So on Formula One, all the jobs are advertised on the website. So feel free to apply. You can apply as many as you want, and you don't get it one, you might get it the second or the third or the fourth, but never give up. The opportunities will arise as long as you have worked hard, because employers will actually recognize. In terms of the students, I would recommend obviously joining Formula Student. It's an asset that all the companies, especially Formula One as well, are recognizing. And then if you want to do, and you have time and probably the money as well to do a master's, one of these highest reputations, the Cranfield, Oxford Brookes, but there might be several others that have also a good label in Formula One. I would also strongly recommend to do that. As you have seen, these are activities that I have done and I have achieved this fact, so why not can you achieve?
Excellent, Mark. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. There's no doubt your words are going to be an inspiration to many students, many people out there. And we're very thankful that you've been able to share this knowledge with all of us. So yeah, once again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
And this is the end of this video. Thank you very much for joining us. As you know, you will be able to find more videos, more interviews, Formula One and motorsports professionals in our academy that you can access via our website, motorsportengineer.net. This is the end of it. Until then, till next time, stay healthy and see you very soon.